Did you see that the Manhattan DA was suing the who was it the Republican chair of the Judicial Committee? I think it was.
No, tell me more.
I don't remember all the details. I was gonna put the link in the show notes and decided I didn't have enough to say about it to be overly interesting. Um, I'll pull it up real quick though. Maybe. Of course, the feed has refreshed since I looked. There we go. Here's a version. Manhattan DA filed a lawsuit against the U.S. House Judiciary Committee and its GOP chairman, Representative Jim Jordan, alleging Republican lawmakers were illegitimately interfering with his prosecution of former President Donald Trump. I mean, there's obviously some information there, but for the most part, everything that I have to say about it is just good for the Manhattan DA for standing up for himself.
Yeah,
I would like to
yeah,
see more follow suit.
yeah. I think it was gonna say in your topic, you mentioned the Tennessee legislators that were banned from the I guess banned from the Capitol, their Capitol building.
They were what's the official term?
They, I cannot remember, but I know that. So it was, so there were three legislatures that were dissent. Well, they were. I don't know. I don't remember.
They were
They said that
expelled.
they were. Yeah, they said under the meat like they weren't following the protocol or rules for the House, and two of them, Justin Jones and Justin Pierce, happened to have black skin, and I'm I'm blanking on the other representative name. She happened to have white skin, and she was the one that was not. I mean, I don't know. I'm sitting here not knowing the details, and that's okay. But that the optics on that are definitely bad.
Yeah, I don't remember which write up I read, but there it was certainly covered in the news that um actually I think Dan Rather might have done a write up. I'll have to go back and look. If so, I'll include a link in the show notes. Um, but the write up that I saw basically pointed to that simple fact as proof positive that race absolutely had something to play in the repercussions for representatives doing something.
I watched some of Justin Jones' speech, and it was excellent. And he's back. He was only out for 2 days. Um, and Justin Pierce's his as we record his is set for uh, a vote to whether or not he can come back is set for tomorrow.
So that'd be what, 4 days for him? 5 days?
Yeah, it'd be 4 days.
So I guess since we've kind of mentioned the topic,
Let's go for it.
so it's interesting. There's not a lot out of the specific article that struck me as, I want to necessarily create a topic around it. It was the combination of how many things are going on simultaneously that made me want to take a moment and pause and kind of talk about it. And so in this article, the article is actually calling attention to the revelation that there is a group actively, excuse me, actively attempting to find new and other ways to disenfranchise voters or potential voters or make it more difficult to vote. And this is something that I know you and I have talked about quite a few times anyway. It's not news necessarily that this occurs. The news is just proof of the existence of it and how widespread it is.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
but in this article that I'm going to link, there was one sentence that uh, kind of caught me off guard, and I want to read it verbatim. So, in I, I keep saying the article. I should probably at least call out uh, where the article, what the article title and where it was posted. It. Um, so Slate ran this article, and it was entitled "The Effort to Suppress the Vote is Spreading to the Republican Mainstream." And so the headline caught me a little bit. But then this quote from the article really grabbed my attention. So the quote is as follows: "It is understandable if this particular report flew below the radar for you. We are all living in Steve Bannon's Trumpian dream world in which flooding the zone with shit has become a remarkably successful political tactic. From the past week's stories of Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas failing to report lavish free vacations, including a $500,000 jaunt on a private plane, to a banker's anti-abortion to a
Bonkers.
bonkers anti-abortion ruling from a Texas judge that bans an abortion drug and lays the groundwork for recognizing a fetus as a human being entitled to full constitutional protection, to the expulsion of two black state legislators from the Tennessee legislature because they had the temerity to protest gun violence fueled by a Supreme Court stuck in the 1790s, to, yes, more mass shootings. It is too easy to be distracted. But that doesn't change the fact that there are people meeting behind closed doors to plot out new paths to voter suppression with direct implications for the type of democracy that we may have in the United States in 2024 and beyond." It's a lot to read,
It is.
especially without my contacts in. Um, but there's so much there, and so much of it relates to things that we have discussed and kind of gone back and forth on, and themes that have been interwoven in a number of different shows. It's it feels overwhelming.
uh, I think it is. Hopefully, it's going to be overwhelming in the good way, in the sense that you know we can stop it, so that I was thinking, thought sorry to finish my thought, was like overwhelming in the sense that maybe that we're beginning to stop evil. The, the all evil has to do for to triumph is for good people to do nothing, and good people are starting to do things, more good people doing more good things, and we are not letting, apparently, the beginning of the indictment of Trump, the hopefully another set of indictments will come down from Georgia. Um, the reinstatement of Justin Jones and hopefully Justin Pearson tomorrow. Um, them using their voices to point out the discrepancy. Even the I think the House leader for the Tennessee legislature said that their expulsion was too hasty. So, or the chair of the chair of the commission uh, uh, for Shelby County, um, about, who is responsible for reappointing Pearson back to his seat. Um, the chair of that commission um, said 2 days ago that Pearson's expulsion was conducted in a hasty manner, and so Um, yeah, I think we've had a lot of people doing bad things for a long time, a lot of corruption, continuing in corruption, opening up for more corruption, and it looks like, I don't know, maybe I'm wrong, maybe I'm being optimistic, but people are fed up with the corruption, and people are starting to stand up against it.
It's certainly hopefully the case. I part of me there are two different trains of thought that I have surrounding this in general. One is that I mentioned it feels overwhelming, but why or how much of that is that it feels overwhelming only because I'm paying more attention to the news than I have in quite a long time. Um, and two, like I want to praise journalists for continuing to dig and continuing to try to tell the story, but is it really leading to action, or is it just the continuation of journalists providing news and details only for it to spur the thought of action and not actual action? Um, and I think a lot of that is to be seen, right?
Yes, yeah,
We It feels like we're at a point where people are more inclined to respond and to say enough's enough and let's do something about it. But part of that is also an inherent bias and level of projection based on where I am mentally, as opposed to an actual understanding of whether people are more inclined to do so, if that makes sense. I feel in a way, in general, that people, generally speaking, in my age range, are kind of fed up with either being ignored or being quiet or trying to just make it through the day and are instead saying, you know what? No, it's time to make a difference. But how much of that is just my little microcosmic social group versus the larger macrocosm of the
yeah,
US population?
yeah. It's hard to know, um, until you see someone who's done some studies or polling, or gives us hard data on that. But I definitely feel I definitely feel what's happening in what I'm seeing in the news is things that I want to see. So,
And the other thing that's kind of interesting, just to think about, and it's really another rhetorical question. Um, Thinking about, is it more just paying attention to things more so than normal, or because we record on a weekly basis, looking for subject matter that makes for an interesting discussion? It's almost one of those where, is it really paying more attention, or is it just more exposure to these specific topics because of how they relate to past conversations that we've had? It could be that I'm scrolling through and skipping a bunch of stuff just because it doesn't relate to anything we've ever discussed. Uh, and there could be a wealth of other news out there that I'm just not looking that close at. Uh, it's all rhetorical. It's all very personalized in experience. The nice thing is I can objectively look at it and say, yeah, this is not a representative picture of day to day life.
I I don't have a response to that.
It's It's funny because this is one of those topics where it created a thought and an initial, or a thought and an emotional response in some fashion, but not in a way that I could actually verbalize and try to talk through.
Right.
And I wasn't sure if that was going to continue to be the case when it was said out loud, as opposed to, just kind of thinking through it internally. And it appears it stays fairly uh, muddled, even when verbally spoken.
Yeah. Actually, the thing I thought I had while you were talking, and I did, you continued, wanted to follow your thought path on that. But one of the things I thought about that I hadn't said yet was that the downside to what we're seeing is it could be here's this event over here, like Trump got indicted in New York, and then maybe he'll get indicted in Georgia, and who knows what the outcome of those cases will be. And then you've got all these places that are uh, resisting the state level abortion bans. Wyoming was my favorite. I don't know if we talked about that at all.
We didn't,
Um,
but I did see the article. So if you want to bring that in,
yeah, yeah. I'll just briefly, I guess at this point it's been a dozen years or so, or close to a dozen years, where Obama was interested. The Obama administration introduced Obamacare, and Wyoming, a Republican dominated state, uh, wanted to resist that and wrote, I think, an amendment to their constitution stating that any adult had the right to decide their own personal health care, make their own personal health care decisions. And recently, a judge used that amendment to put a temporary block on the abortion ban that Wyoming, the Wyoming legislature wrote into law. And I thought that was, chef's kiss beautiful.
it creates the perfect scenario to say thanks, Obama.
Yeah.
Um,
Thanks, Obama.
the the same article did mention that similar either statutes or laws or amendments have been used to do the same thing in other states, but I don't remember what other states.
I don't remember either, but those are one, it's fun, they're fun to hear about because it's like, hey, you know basically set didn't see that backfiring on themselves. But all of this is great, and it feels like progress, but there's a chance that this, they remain isolated events, and if it doesn't reach a critical mass, maybe nothing will change, and that's the concern. We're in a place where, cool, we're seeing good things happen, but again, if that sort of critical mass, that however you want to define it, reaching a certain point of lasting effect isn't doesn't occur, then we'll continue in our drudgery, I suppose.
The there are two ways that I look at that. One, if you think about it's the chart that shows early adopters to um, popular what, diffusion of innovation. That's what I was trying to think of.
Yes,
The law
yes.
of
Okay.
diffusion of innovation. So you have, technically you have innovators, and then you have your early adopters, and then there's a line, and you have to get over
Yeah.
that line into the early majority. And that, from a product standpoint, that is what you think of when you think of the critical mass thought. You gain enough
Yes.
traction to have exposure throughout a market. And I mean, the same thing occurs with uh, behaviors and everything else. Like you have a certain number of people that are just going to get it. They they recognize the value, they recognize what you're trying to do. However you want to describe it, you have, you know, a
It resonates.
certain amount of people who are going to be on board no matter what. Going from that group to the early majority so that you get true penetration of an idea, that is what's needed for this to be more than just isolated events.
Yes.
The question is, how do you measure that? Do you measure it by state? Like, say 20% of states? But I don't think that works because you're going to have some states like the one we're in that are going to hold out forever. Because by God, you're not going to tell me what I have to do any to any degree.
Yeah. Well, I think you see things like we saw this happen with gay marriage, and I think we're about to see this happen with uh, THC. But with gay marriage, it was like, what is it? I think it was 13 states that legalized it before it became federally legal. And then we're in a place, I think at this point, there's at least 20 states that have made marijuana legal. And I think it eventually will become, oh, I don't think we're far off from it becoming federally legalized. I mean, even where we live now, in the city that we live in, it's decriminalized. You know, it's like you get, a certain amount, you get a parking ticket kind of violation sort of thing, or speeding ticket violation type of issue. But yeah, it's, I think, different, like what constitutes enough momentum or enough like your term, enough penetration to reach that critical mass for sweeping change or long lasting change. I think is going to be different for each thing, for each issue, and it's going to be dependent upon who's currently running things. And so, um, yeah, it's going to be very difficult to predict.
It's also, I think it's so different from one thing to another. It doesn't feel like reproductive rights, for lack of a better term in general, are something that's going to gain widespread traction in the region that we're in, thinking about the Southeast in general, for a while. But it's predominantly because of how heavily uh, evangelical conservatives dominate the landscape here. Um, kind of where I'm going with the thought is I think you can gain enough traction for it to be noticed and for something to happen at the federal level and it still be vehemently fought in the Southeast based on religion, very specifically, and the freedom of religion argument in general, which, let's just be clear, it does not hold water in this debate in any way, shape, fashion, or form. We can do a whole separate show on that, no problem. Um, but because of the way that feels, it feels like it's going to take a huge amount of momentum to really make progress outside of the isolated incidents. And this is where, kind of why I'm bringing this up, is this is where I feel like it's a it's something that is so horribly biased based on region about how you view whether or not traction is being gained, that for me, it feels like we're not making any progress. But if I try to separate myself back from living here and look at what's occurring throughout the country, it does feel like we're making progress. And that dissonance is really difficult to wrap my head around when you're talking about all these other topics as well. Uh, because I can tell you without a doubt, white supremacy and racism is alive and well in the Southeast and rampant. It's just either veiled or uh, not veiled, depending on what county you're in, for the most
I
part.
know. I
Uh,
know.
and and knowing that that is still so perversely rooted in day to day life, what, 60 years after the civil rights movement, it makes it really tough to look at all of the progress that has been made, in other regions, and not kind of laugh or scoff at it as fake progress. Because I do think progress has been made. I do think we're better off today than we were 60 years ago.
Oh yeah.
It just day to day, it doesn't always feel like it. And I'm saying this as a white guy. Imagine, I mean, that's how how bad is it to be a person of color in the Southeast? Like I can't imagine the difficulty I would face day to day. Sorry, I felt like I took it a bit on a rant there, but it just because of that, it's really tough to look at any of these other topics and feel like we truly are making progress.
I think in the middle of progress, it's hard. It's really hard to feel like progress is being made. Like many things, it's hard in the midst of doing a thing or being a part of a thing or um, that takes you know years to accomplish. It or even months to accomplish. It feels difficult to gauge what progress looks like. But even if you look at where we are in, where we were in 2010 versus where we are today, a baker's dozen years later, it's there's definitely been progress. There's been good progress in on many fronts, but
So
it's go ahead.
I just wanted to mention there was a perfect reference you could have brought in as well. Um, from the Dark Knight, the dawn is, or the night is darkest
The
before the
night is
dawn.
darkest before the dawn. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
There is an element of that as well, and I had to reference it because the movie really parallels this same feeling in a lot of ways. And who doesn't love bringing a movie into a conversation anyway? Um,
yeah.
but the thought really is that we're going to get to the deepest, darkest, worst point before things get better. Because as just a byproduct of how we tend to operate as humans, is that we accept something and take it until we reach a breaking point.
You know, we talked about being near the end of this crisis turning point in a few shows ago, and every other crisis ended with a war. And what if there's a possibility? What if the successful conviction of Donald Trump for interfering with the election, uh, inciting a coup? What if those are the things that are we may look back and see those as the events that are the turning point?
Could be.
Yeah.
Um, I do think it would be interesting if you had the conviction of Trump for um, misuse of campaign finances. I think was the officially the Manhattan one, right? for interfering with the election, indictment and conviction, Fox News publicly airing its dirty laundry and apologizing and setting the record straight, and then from that point forward operating as an actual news organization.
Right.
I think if you had those types of things all come together and coalesce, where
Yes.
a number of misguided individuals kind of recognize what the rest of us have pointed to as reality, or some basis of factual interpretation of the information, and that gets to, let's just say, 65% of the population total. You have a very significant majority that finally um, coalesces on an actual, true, proper understanding of events and where we are. That could very well signal the transition from this crisis turning into one of prosperity.
Yes.
And it will be interesting to see it happen without a war.
It will be.
I still don't. I don't think we're going to escape conflict, though.
Sadly, you're probably right. Yeah.
Part of that is the Gen Xer just response to, I'm going to prepare for some apocalyptic event, and then it's going to be somewhere on the scale above that, and I will at least be ready to deal with whatever happens.
We have a number of different ways set up for you to get in touch with us to provide feedback, ask questions, or just comment in about something we've discussed.
You can hit us up on Twitter or Instagram at untitled_hosts, or shoot an email over to untitled.hosts@gmail.com.
Or get in touch directly with Jesse at jthart.com, or get in touch with me, John, via telepathy.
If you would like to support our work or are interested in listening to our new after show feed, head over to patreon.com/theUntitledPodcast and take a look at the options we have set up.
Thank you for listening.
We hope you've enjoyed the show.
And we hope to connect with more of you as we continue this journey.
That's a wrap.